But a great idea. You have these rat people living down this garage. Sort of plays off the Seinfeld episode where they get lost in a garage. Malls with their horribly complex garages these days. Maybe the only time you actually have a reference to a mother outside of parent-teacher night in Zim. So few mothers in this show. I believe Jonan didn't have a mother. His mother died when he was very young, so I think he just didn't write a lot about mothers. Generally tend to be fathers, sort of to portray his own life. You generally write about what you know. And he wrote about what he knew. Video games, fathers, and strong desires. I believe we had to pitch up the voice for that scream. I'm not certain. Oh, missed a sound effect. Should have had a sound effect of that front door being knocked on. Or punched or something. It's also good to see Gaz sort of having this kind of supernatural ability to get around, because she always seemed to frighten people, and yet there was no real power behind her. She was just this tiny little girl. And we could never, of course, have her punching people, although he did later on in Taste Her Pork. But at least by seeing her sort of flash around and sort of have a mastery over reality, you can kind of get the idea that she has some sort of a power, even though it's not defined terribly well. But that's not necessary. You just know that something bad will happen if you get on Gaz's bad side. I think we tried to submit this episode. This was one of the episodes I think Mary Harrington wanted to submit for an Emmy. But we never did. I think we did Room with a Moose instead. Here's our little close screen. We always did that sort of I didn't always do it, but occasionally we'd close up the screen, do that sort of black framing. I took that actually and used that in the first episode in the school, and it was taken from Giant Robo, the interstitials in Giant Robo. Again, the anime Giant Robo coming up, and I just thought it was such a cool effect. I used it once, and people would use it occasionally. Sometimes I'd put it in. Really crafty editing here with that. That's just Chris Hink, our editor, going nuts, putting frames all over to sort of just show frantic movement. That's a nice touch, slowing down and then speeding up. Very complex backgrounds. Our background crew is really quite amazing. Did a really good job, I thought. Again, there were a lot of problems, though. Jonan didn't like the backgrounds either. Thought they were just not his style, although he could never define his style. He never really drew many backgrounds in his comic books, so we sort of had to just suffer, or the background crew had to suffer. They did great ornate backgrounds, and usually highly functional, although they'd misinterpret the boards a lot of times, willingly, but generally very nice. And the color department, a lot of times, putting in great color over those backgrounds. Although the background guys would sometimes get very angry because the color guys would obscure a lot of detail, which Jonan wanted with black or dark purples. All that hard work just obscured by the color. Those guys would get very, very upset, but never stopped. It always went that way. Oh, this ending. We had so much trouble with this ending. This is basically Jonan blowing off New York, because you couldn't have Iggins dead. Or, you know, just, you had to know what happened to Iggins. You had to see Iggins lived. You had to hear that Iggins lived. So I sort of storyboarded this little And that guitar riff was from our the guy who owned the sound mixing studio. We just got him in the studio to quickly do a quick riff and yell Iggins. Another confusing ending. Seemed rather plausible at the time. It never quite worked out. I mean, there were some good endings to Zim, but boy, I'd say probably 2/3 of them were just horrible. I mean, looking back at them, they were just sort of abrupt and weird, which, you know, is at least the show's own flavor. Yeah, to me, it kind of reminded me of the old Warner Brothers cartoons. They would just sort of end, and kind of end abruptly. But hell, I mean, when you really look at most cartoons, endings are either corny or bland, so why not have something that's a little bit offbeat?